Okay, welcome back everyone. We're going to continue along in our IoT project, and what we're now looking at is we're going to examine a little bit further the Opc Ua protocol. Okay, now in our last video, what we just did was we set up the Opc server in Siemens TIA portal, and then we just set up a little bit of ladder logic so that I could view literally the some parameters within the PLC. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how we can start to pass this information along the Opc protocol. So to do this, we actually have to use a separate piece of software to examine the protocol structure. Now, in newer versions of Siemens TIA portal, it actually comes with a plugin for OPC connections. But for the moment, I'm just going to use a free software package. It's called UA Expert, and that allows me to set up basically what's called an Opc Ua Client. So the PLC is the server, and we have another software package that's going to act as the client to view some of the information, and we can read and write this information between the two. So it's free piece of software, UA Expert, okay. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to connect it. So to do that, we need to actually go back into TIA portal and look at the server address of where the Opc Ua server is. So if I go into my device configuration, you can see here underneath the server, we have the server address and the port number. Okay, so that's quite important to us. So we'll copy that and we can use that to connect to it. So if we take that address, we can go in here, we can add a server. Okay, and this is one I've recently connected to, so I'm just going to delete that. And you can see custom discovery, we're going to add a server, and it'll ask me for the address. I can simply copy and paste that in. So now this is popped up here. We can see that's the IP address, PLC, and the port number that the Opc Ua protocol is sitting on. So if I click into it, it'll ask me for some options here around some of the security settings that we set. But I'm just going to go ahead and go none, and that'll put it in here. So here's one of our servers. We've got to right click on it and then connect, and you can start to see it's connected to the device. Okay, now remember I have my PLC, the hardware here connected, so I have the PLC in front of me along the Ethernet port. So that's where the OPC communication is sitting along. So when I go into my PLC 1, I can start to see, well, if I go into some of the tag tables, I can see my start, my reset buttons. There's my memory table in here, our outputs that we set up. So I can start to see the tags that I've created, and also that OPC data block with the variable. So I can start to see these components that I wanted to read from my PLC code. So all these devices here, and I want to be able to view these tags and view these values and essentially read and write from them. So read the values and then also overwrite the values so that I can pass some information into this. So I'm going to start to create a custom table in here where it'll just make it a little bit easier for me to view it. See if I drag and drop this variable in, it's currently at 143, and every 10 seconds that should be changing. Remember, that's the value of my counter that's changing. So we should see that happening. Other things I would like to maybe bring in is my output. I want to maybe look at the motor turning on and off. I want to see that value. It's currently false, it's off. And some of my memory I want to bring in, have my start and my reset push button. What one did I bring in there? I brought in the reset. I'm going to bring in the start. So I want to see those because those tags are really some of the ones that I'm going to want to influence and read and write to. And then I'll bring in my hard inputs, my hardwired inputs, but I'll discuss a little bit them in a second. So like we're saying, we can see these values, and well, if I go in here, and let's say I put on my monitoring mode so I can see exactly what's happening in the PLC. If I look at that data block, again, put on my monitoring mode, these values should match the same as what's here. Okay, and if I go ahead and I activate some of the code, so let's say I force some of these inputs and outputs on, there's my motor on. I should see that my motor has turned on and that that start button, that memory bit that I activated, has also come on. So you can see I'm getting the visual, I'm reading the data in this separate piece of software. So I can modify that to 0, I can modify this to 1, and then I can modify that back to 0. So I can essentially see the value of the tags, and that's really useful information if I want to, let's say, put that out to a HMI screen, or essentially what we will be doing will be putting it onto our Node-RED dashboard. So I'm starting to see them values. I'm starting to see like a communication along the OPC protocol. Now, really where I really need this software is when you're dealing with OPC communication, we need to know the namespace index, and the identifier type is very important for us. So I can see this is a namespace index 3 and its identifier is called a string type, and this is what it's being identified as. Okay, so once we know these things, then we can start to actually um, communicate along the OPC protocol. Okay, and notice if I go into just back into that var, if I open that one up, you see the namespace identifier is opc.var2 with speech marks around it, the commas. It's a string type. Some of these, when you take them in, they will be just an index type, so a number, but this has actually got a string label to it. So that's the data type that comes with it. So these are all very important pieces of information that I need to know to allow for, you can see it there, the namespace ID, the node ID, that I can actually communicate along this OPC protocol. And I can't get this information directly from TIA portal, so that's why I need to use this piece of software to essentially get me this piece of information. Now, okay, we can see that we can look at these values and we can actually write to some of them. Let's say if I turn on, let's go with this one, we turn that one to true. You can see my motor turns on and my code will actually activate. So I can see there's an inherent link now between the two software packages, but to be honest, what I want to do, I want to modify that. I want to modify, just put everything back to 0. Um, the two software packages linked, but I'm not actually really going to use this software as part of my IoT project. I just need to get this information in. And as I said, it'll make a little bit more sense when we go into the next video and we start opening up Node-RED, which we can create a dashboard, kind of like what we have here, so we can see the values. But what we're going to be able to do is we're going to be able to do something a little bit better and then push these values to the cloud. But I need to know this information here, these string variables and how they're being identified and what namespace index they've been given along the OPC protocol. And I can't get that, well, especially on version 14 for TIA, I can't get that within TIA portal, so that's why I need a separate software. Okay, so hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Really what we're just doing is we're connecting the OPC client software, which is this. We're connecting it to the OPC server, which is in the PLC, and we're just looking at some of the values of the tags to identify their namespace IDs. Because when we open up Node-RED, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to connect it as an Opc Ua Client, connect it to the PLC, read these values in, but as I said, it's just not as easy as dragging and dropping as what we were doing there. I need to actually type these kind of string identifiers and stuff in. So it should make a little bit more sense in the next video, but that's how we can set up an Opc Ua protocol with TIA portal and the software here, the UA Expert.